Hi everyone, Master P here from the Language of Composition 3rd edition. We're here for another close reading passage video, and today we're taking a look at an excerpt from Professions for Women by Virginia Woolf. So let's jump into it. All right, so we know that when we are reading closely, we are reading actively, and that means we are engaging in a text beyond just mere enjoyment. We're going past the surface and really trying to reveal those layers of meaning, really trying to get at the writer's argument, position, claims, strategies, style, all of the complexities that go into a beautiful piece of writing. So, in order to do this, we will obviously need certain tools. We'll need our copies of the Language of Composition 3rd edition. We'll need our close reading passage handouts. Highlighters are always helpful, and of course, something to write with a pen or a pencil. So we start by thinking about the rhetorical situation. And when we think about the rhetorical situation, we want to consider, of course, those classic elements of the rhetorical triangle. So thinking about how a text is shaped by the speaker, by the audience, and by the subject matter. And then how all of those pieces are affected by that larger context, contemporary discussions that are going on in society at the time of the composition of the text, historical events that bear a particular weight on a text. So really thinking about how all of those elements influence the creation of a text. So let's think about the rhetorical situation for this piece. As I said, the writer, Virginia Woolf, she was a prominent English writer. She was known primarily for her novels. Mrs. Dalloway might be one that you've read. And she was from an affluent family. But as she writes about in this speech, just because she was from a wealthy family, she still dealt with her own trials and tribulations, and in particular, these gender stereotypes that really ran up against her aspirations and dreams to be a writer. And so she had to learn how to navigate and fight back against those stereotypes. So this occasion, or the occasion for this speech, was the 1931 Women's Service League meeting. They invited Virginia Woolf to speak at this meeting, and we'll see in the next slide that her audience, the women who are part of this league, were women in the workforce during the early 1930s. So you have women who are really pioneers and trailblazers in these professional fields. And so Woolf has this in common with these women. Now, a lot of these women are not from as much wealth as Virginia Woolf. And so they've had perhaps extra hurdles to overcome, and Woolf acknowledges that. But all of the women have, what they all have in common is the fact that they are going against the norm, and they're really setting out into uncharted territory with women in the workforce. So her subject matter is her experiences as a woman writer, her experiences blazing a trail in a formerly male-oriented field, and her path to professional success. So our first step, of course, is to read for understanding. Virginia Woolf can be a very complicated writer, but this speech is actually, I think, really accessible. And this passage that we're looking at is also very, it's very narrative in its style. So I did want to clarify or remind everyone that in the moments before this passage, Virginia Woolf is talking about, she's trying to describe a novelist's state of mind. And she says, I suspect that the state is the same both for men and women, right? Be that as it may, I want you to imagine me writing a novel in a state of trance. In a state of trance. I want you to figure to yourselves a girl sitting with a pen in her hand, which for minutes and indeed for hours she never dips into the ink pot. And then she gets into this particular image. So that's the context for this excerpt. All right, so I'm going to pause the video so you can take a moment to read for understanding. Okay, so we're back. All right, now we want to think about those overall features because we know that when we're analyzing, we're looking at how those smaller pieces contribute to the larger whole. So, all right, so I'm going to refer to my notes, and this is what I wrote for purpose. I said that her purpose is to depict through metaphor a common experience of women writers. All right, and then I also said another purpose of this passage is to criticize the way society's rules impede women's imaginations and creativity. Okay. For mood, I said that her mood is intense. At some points in this speech, she gets a little cheeky, but the way that I felt that this particular passage was really intense. I mean, I know it's a story, and maybe there are some words that you would come up with that get at a different kind of emotion. But it just sort of sucks you in. This moment just sucks you in, and it just feels very intense. At least to me. I don't know. There's a wonderful play called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? And I think I'm a little bit afraid of her because she's so brilliant. All right. So tone, I said that her attitude toward this girl is sympathetic. And her attitude toward this male influence is disapproving. And her attitude toward creativity is vital. I don't know that that's the right word. She believes that creativity is vital. So I'm not sure if that's the right word to describe her tone, but it's certainly an essential element in this speech. Okay, so her position, women typically stop short of expressing their imagination because of their concern for what men will say, and her position on that is this is wrong, right? Okay, so let's take a look at our next steps. We've read for understanding. We kind of have a feel for the whole, right? Maybe we're coming up with some better words as we work along. That's okay. And now we want to get into the text and look for those elements of style and argument. So after we do our annotating, we're going to come back to our graphic organizer to collect our thoughts, and then we're going to use that information and turn it into some actual rhetorical analysis writing. So let's switch over to the passage. Okay. All right, there's so much here. Good grief. So she starts by referring to this image that comes to her mind. And this is the beginning of the extended metaphor of the girl as a fisherman. So this girl, any woman, right? Yes, she's describing a girl involved in the novelist state of mind, but it really applies to any kind of creative thinking. So the girl equals the fisherman, right? Lying sunk in dreams on the verge of a deep lake with a rod held out over the water. I mean, we just feel there's a calmness to this, right? The mood is very calm. We're sunk. We're in our dreams. We're on the verge of a deep lake. Really, a lot of images that tap into the unconscious, which is what she's getting at, right? She was letting her imagination sweep unchecked round every rock and cranny, submerged in the depths of our unconscious being. So this concept of being unconscious and letting yourself just go in a way, you're unchecked. You're not she's making this point in this argument that when we aren't concerned with what society has to say, we have this beautiful freedom, right, that's allowed. Now came the experience that I believe to be far commoner with women writers than with men, which is an interesting claim. We come back very quickly, though, to the the metaphor, right? And her imagination rushes away. And then there was a smash. There was an explosion. There was foam and confusion. We get into this series of short, simple sentences that really mimic the quick actions she's describing. So these things are happening, right? Okay, let me refer to my notes. And then she's in this state of the most acute and difficult distress. She's roused from her dream. And there's there's really two meanings to this word dream. Yes, dream refers back to what's happening in this description, right? She's lying sunk in her dreams. But also I think this dream that is as yet unrealized, that women are allowed to be unchecked in their imaginations, that at this point, that is only a dream, this point in history. And then she realizes that what she's working on is unfitting for her as a woman to say, right? Unfitting, it's unsuitable, it's not allowed. Men, her reason told her, okay, so this logic is coming up against what is well, I wouldn't say illogical, but the logic of reality is now, as she describes it, right, there's a smash. And the smash is between the reason, the logic of reality, and the illogical, I guess, at this point, because it wasn't allowed, the dream, let's say, the dream of being unchecked. The consciousness of what men will say of a woman who speaks the truth about her passions has roused her from her artist state of unconsciousness. Okay, so she's really sort of summarizing at this moment what she's just tried to describe through this extended metaphor. She could write no more. The trance was over. Again, short, simple sentences, this realization, cold, hard facts, really. Right? They mimic the cold, hard facts. This, I believe, she comes back to her authority on this issue because she is a female writer. She knows what this is about. So here we have her referring to her own experiences and her authority on this issue. They're impeded by the extreme conventionality of the other sex, for though men sensibly allow themselves great freedom in these respects. So she says, yes, it makes sense for people to allow themselves great freedom. Absolutely. I doubt that they realize or can control the extreme severity with which they condemn such freedom in women. And that's where we see her censure. That's a good word. Her censure of the way society has set up these rules, of society's rules at this point. This is what women should be. It's sensible to allow women to have the same freedom. Okay. So let's come back. Come on back. And we're going to look at a particular quotation. We're going to put it into our own words so that we make sure we know what Virginia Woolf was trying to say. We're going to look at her rhetorical strategy or style element in that quotation, and then think about the effect or function. So the quotation that I selected to discuss with you today is: the image that comes to my mind when I think of this girl is the image of a fisherman lying sunk in dreams on the verge of a deep lake with a rod held out over the water. So the first sentence in this excerpt. All right. The way I worded it, I said, when I think of this girl, she reminds me of a fisherman who is daydreaming on the edge of a lake, holding a fishing pole over the water. So I noticed metaphor, imagery, and syntax. Those were the elements I wanted to, or that I noticed. Okay. my notes here, I said metaphor depicts an abstract experience with a common one, and her syntax mimics the pace of the fisherman and is unbroken. So my notes are okay, but obviously that's not going to work in or should I say it's not going to fly, like fly fisherman, in an essay. So I need to clean this up a little bit, right? Okay, so here's what I wrote. Woolf uses an extended metaphor to convey an abstract experience in a concrete and visual manner. The audience is drawn into Woolf's mind with the image of a fisherman lying sunken in dreams. From here, the images in the sentence run on, uninterrupted by punctuation, just as the rod and line stretch and sink into the water. These images establish the peaceful mood Woolf will soon upend. Okay, so I've identified the techniques, I've identified the extended metaphor, the images, but even more important is to connect what Woolf has done, the strategies she has used, to their effect and to their purpose. So it's not enough to say, hey, here's a metaphor, here's an image, but actually to draw those conclusions like conveying an abstract experience in a concrete and visual manner, drawing in the audience, the syntax kind of mimicking the imagery, and the imagery itself establishing the mood. So those are all comments about the effect and function of the techniques. So that's really important. All right. Now, from here, hopefully I could turn this into a well-written essay where I would analyze the rhetorical strategies used by Woolf to inspire her audience. Or if we wanted to be even more vague, something you might see on an AP exam, it might actually just say used by Woolf to achieve her purpose. And then you would have to determine what is her purpose before getting into the analysis. So thank you so much for your hard work. Thank you for your time today. As always, we say, fare thee well, young scholars.